your hand. We will have a few other polls throughout the webinar, and at that time, we'll also be answering any questions that you have. So we'll be taking a couple of breaks to answer questions, but please put your questions in the chat section so we can go from there. Again, my name is Rich Peterson. I'm a relationship manager at Allen Interactions. Today's host is Steve Lee. He's one of our co-founders and a client service or VP of client services. So at some point, we'll get moving through this. It's 12 o'clock now. So if there's any, again, questions, please raise your hand and move forward. Steve, I'd like to have you start with your screen right after I end this polling session, and we can see what the results are of our attendees. And take it away, Steve.
Thank you very much, Rich, and welcome to everyone. It seems like you're from all over the country. I'm looking at the chat, and it seems as though yep, all from the States, so welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about how to develop training when your audience is having to do multiple things at the same time. Today, we're going to focus on having conversations and working in some type of system, like a software system. Call centers do this all the time, whether it's customer service or sales or collections. Trying to develop e-learning that can handle that to create a relevant, authentic experience so that people can practice before they are put in front of actual customers can be challenging, especially when you want the training to have a direct impact with whatever key performance indicators that might be laid out in front of you. So we found a lot of success with a project we did with Toyota Financial Services. So we're going to go over that. So we'll spend about a third of the session going over the kinds of strategies, the questions that were raised to help us design a solution. About a third will show the solution and its different components, and a third will be questions and answers. But as Rich said, we're going to be taking questions as we go. So every few minutes we'll stop and see if we have any questions so far. All right, so as Rich had already said, he is here as our webinar master. He'll be fielding the questions, letting me know if there's something important, any technical issues going on. And my name is Steve Lee. I was lucky enough to help Dr. Allen found Allen Interactions about 26 years ago. And I'm also the VP of Client Success. This project with Toyota, I was quite hands-on. I actually moved down to Phoenix, Arizona to develop this with their call center down there. So I thought this would be a good example. So with all examples that we show at Allen Interactions, we strive to make sure that learning isn't boring. And as long as we can enhance the learner's motivation to learn, and the example we'll be showing you is doing that by creating those realistic situations where they feel what they're going through on the computer is just like it will be in the real world. We want to focus the learner on behavior enhancing tasks. We don't want a lot of memorization when they don't need to memorize. And we've seen that a large majority of e-learning that's being developed assumes everything is a fact and hope that their learners memorize, when in fact, especially with the Toyota example, they had online job aids. They had software that was intuitive that guided them. They had call scripts they could lean on, but the critical thinking skills, that's something we wanted to focus on. So we made sure that the training focused on using the tools that were developed for them instead of trying to get them to memorize tools that they had access to all the time. And with all of that, we wanted to provide meaningful and memorable learning experiences. So that's sort of the Allen Interactions mantra. So when we look at any learning situation, any kind of a challenge, we first take the content and we divide it up. We don't want to teach everything the same way. So first, if we're trying to motivate students, if we're trying to pull at their heartstrings or show the relevance or importance or the seriousness of the content. We do believe that demonstrations using different types of media are very powerful to bring them in and make them want to learn more. We're not so much in using long videos to just replace lecture and then quizzes afterwards to see if they were watching and listening. So there's a place for motivational demonstrations. There is a time to learn facts. We've done a lot of work with the airline industry, and they still need to know that Chicago O'Hare Airport is ORD, and Newark, I think is EWG, I can't remember, but they do. So when it's a fact, we believe in doing repetition, sometimes some fun games to get adult learners to want to do things more than once. When we're talking about learning software, there are procedures that need to be followed. And sometimes we're just trying to teach the step-by-step, but in those procedures, there might be some decision points, and there may be mistakes that people make outside of simply knowing what to do next. You might train someone on best practices in using software, but after they get out on the job, everyone around them has found shortcuts. They've found ways that they believe are easier. They might not be putting in all the data. They might not be going fast enough. So there's a lot of things we need to consider when people are training to use software. Concepts. Now it gets a little deeper. If people need to make decisions, then they need to understand the why they made them and what could happen for both proper and improper decisions. That's a different type of training. And then there's problem solving. A lot of times it's bringing it all together and trying to fix a problem with concepts, perhaps following procedures and knowing some facts. And we also believe that any training you build should go through a three-step process. First, you design it so that the students will trust the training. And what I mean by that is our research over the decades has shown if all you're doing is telling your students the right way to do it, then you test them. Do they remember the proper way to do it? They believe it's what the quote company line is. When they get out in the real world, they'll say, well, I know how I'm supposed to do it, but it doesn't make sense. I don't really know what could go wrong. So we'll lean a little more on common sense. And if something goes wrong when they're trying to use what they learned in training, they'll give up on it and say, well, I know this is what they tell me to do, but I don't know if it works. If you can create these authentic learning environments where they can make mistakes and they get to see the consequences, and you can guide them to trying again, give them some hints. When they succeed at the challenge, they were invested. They felt they partly solved the problem, and we found that then they believe what they learned in training works because they got to overcome situations. Try it. If the training doesn't seem to be the same environment as when they're on the job, they might remember everything, but again, our research has found if the training doesn't put them in the same situations, whether it be role plays, some kind of authentic practice, even on the job, mentoring and shadowing, we found that they are much more likely to give up on what they learned in training. And the last part we call the stick to it. It's kind of like a diet program. If you listen to a commercial, you read something about this new diet program, and if it makes sense to you, you trust it, and you might be willing to try it after you read what you're allowed to eat, what the ingredients are, how hard it might be. But then you go diet and lose all the weight that you're planning on losing. Do you blame the diet and just give it up? Or do you try to figure out what you might be doing wrong, or if you need to make some subtle changes because you believe in it so much, you want to stick to it? So we believe in the training. There should be situations that a learner cannot get right. They can take all the right steps, do everything they're supposed to, and at the end, they still don't make the sale. They still make the customer upset. They still break something. Because we can, in feedback during the training, let them know you did everything perfectly. You should be proud of yourself. But now you know, in the real world, not everything's going to go your way, and you understand that now. So we're not waiting until they get to the real world to figure that out. So we went through this with the Toyota need to make sure we separated into these different categories. And yes, we created some unwinnable situations. Some of you may have seen this research, the 70-20-10 model from the Center for Creative Leadership, stating that learning happens in different arenas. 10% from formal learning, and most people would consider what we do as a profession, instructor-led, virtual instructor-led, e-learning, to be formal training. 20% more from feedback and coaching, but 70% from experience. And we have a bit of an issue with assuming that a student is only 10 to 20% ready to go out in front of customers. And how many customers are they going to have inconsistent relationships with, make mistakes, lose customers? Maybe they make mistakes that are more dramatic. We really believe that if things are designed the right way, you can create the experience and the feedback and coaching in the learning design through practice. So how do we provide those experiences? Well, if we can motivate the students to want to learn, because putting them into a situation that's realistic is hard. Most training is designed to be kind of easy. It's pretty much reading and listening. If we want to create training where they have the same challenges, it's just as hard as the job. We need to make sure that they're wanting it and they're ready for it. And so that's what we did with Toyota. We also made sure that we didn't teach everything as a fact. So when we are looking at any training for a client, we want to go through the simple, are the students going to be in the same place at the same time? If so, they're all in one location, ILT can work really well. What if they can be there at the same time but different place? Oh, webinar like we're doing now could work, some kind of distance learning. A lot of us are dealing with a diverse learner population, different time zones. They can take the training when it's available. So we've been doing e-learning for decades, and now there's some social learning out there. We found the value in creating cohorts and having collaborative projects where groups of learners can work together to increase the learning. But what a lot of people leave off is this last part. If you are going to have job aids, if you're going to have performance support systems, if you're going to have these groups that continue to work together in teams beyond the learning, then we design the learning to utilize these items. So we no longer take all the content and create page after page of this is the procedure, this is what you need to know, this is the workflow. If those are available, either online or printed, we create training for the students to utilize those job aids. And then we get to build more training and more practice and less sort of content-focused training. And we use some serious e-learning concepts in our design. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Serious E-Learning Manifesto, but up on eLearningManifesto.org, we're trying to move from the typical e-learning designs. So we're trying to move from content-focused to what we consider to be more serious is performance-focused. Trying to make the training about doing, 80, 90, 100% of the online being about completing a task. Making sure that it's meaningful to learners and it's highly engaging. That we want everything to have a story. We want to create authentic context that's just like the job. Give them realistic decisions. We don't want to create a right answer and then create 3 wrong answers on how do we trick the student? How do we change a word? We really want the wrong answer, at least one of them, to be something that learners go, oh, it's absolutely that answer, and I will defend it to the end because they haven't quite got the concepts we're teaching them yet. So those realistic decisions require creating challenges for students where they really believe the wrong answer is the right answer. It's not just guessing wrong. Individualized challenges, if we can. We'd love to do spaced practice. When we're teaching, we'll teach a concept for 20 minutes, a half an hour, teach a different concept, and then a different one. Then we might go back to the first concept at a higher level, and we don't just stick with one content area or one topic of learning for hours on end. We found if you space it out, even days apart, weeks apart are better from behavioral and cognitive research. We found that spacing the practice is great. And of course, we want to make sure there's real world consequences. It's not about getting an 85% on the test. It's, did you sell it? In this example for Toyota, did you collect it? Did you make them happy? So we want real world consequences involved. I'm going to go over this one slide and then we'll get to some questions. So at Allen Interactions, anytime we're looking at the approach to design e-learning and create activities, we have the taxonomy, the Bloom's taxonomy along the sides here. And based on what the learner needs to be able to do, sometimes we create recall and memorization. And those are the repetitive games you've seen. You know, what is the 3-letter designation for O'Hare? Very simple. A judgment, that means not only does the learner need to know the right answer, but they need to know the why or the why not. What could go wrong if? Why is this answer better than the other? So if we're giving them decisions to make at that level, we consider that a judgment level activity. Consequence, the easiest way to describe it is a role play. If you've ever seen a role play and you might be trying to sell someone, they say something and you might have 3 choices on what to pick. And if the learning objective at this point is to ask an open-ended question, then one of those choices is an open-ended question and the other ones aren't. And so the open-ended question is always the right one. And the next one might be ask about their needs. And the next one might be find out what benefits they're looking for. So it's a role play. It's a role play where the right answer is always the right answer. We're trying to get into the learner's heads. These are the approaches and the concepts we want you to use in a conversation. When we're talking about multitasking and we're talking about customers and software and conversations, every customer is a little different. So strategy is meant to take consequence to the next level that says these are your choices, but for customer A, C is probably the best choice. For customer B, A is the right choice if this situation occurs. B is the right choice if this other situation occurs. So there's some critical thinking going on. There isn't a way to just say, I know the right path and the right answer. What we usually say is strategy is like playing checkers. You know about jumping, you know about getting kinged, but before you jump, you better make sure that the other player doesn't have a move that they can take advantage of. So that's strategy. Exploration goes a little higher. The Toyota example I'm going to show is at a strategy level. Exploration is more like chess. I can teach someone all the moves of chess. I can let them practice. But for them to really get good, they have to play a lot. They would have to learn about other people's strategies. And I cannot guarantee that I can get someone to be good because the learning comes from just deep playing and deep thought. So strategy, there's a rule set. Don't jump if. Exploration, don't know. I don't know if you should move your pawn or your knight at this point. Here are all the things you might want to look at. And then simulation is putting someone in a full, immersive, sometimes 3D world. So what I want to know from you is what e-learning approaches are you using? So Rich, a question. Can I be on the previous slide while they answer this question to see which of these, what's kind of the highest you've gone? Or do I have to be on the other slide?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. They should be there. They can see the poll, whichever slide that you're on. So you can leave it there. And I'll leave this poll on. There is 2 parts to this poll. So there's 2 questions. Steve didn't put it on. The second part is what e-learning approach do you use most? So they're answering both those questions as we go. And we'll give it till it's been up there about a minute. So got about 15 more seconds.
Okay, great.
And here are your results.
Okay, looks like most people are doing recall and memorization, and then judgment is what they're using most. And some people have gotten into the exploration and the simulation, that's wonderful. All right, let me move past here. Any additional questions? So if you want to ask something, go ahead and put it in the chat window. And I want to spend a few minutes to be able to answer anything that has come up from those introductory slides.
And Steve, we did have one question, though it might come up when you're talking about Toyota later, but just to keep in mind, curious how long the needs analysis took for the Toyota project.
It took a month. We had 4 people working on it. It was, they had started by having 2 months of training and a month in a classroom, and then a month out of the classroom with someone sitting next to you while you're on the phones. So it took 2 months before anyone that was onboarded was allowed to be on the phone by themselves. So going through all of that content, because there's so much. Toyota was using 7 different softwares, and they migrated to Salesforce. So we actually used part of the training to teach the existing collections agents how to use the Salesforce component, but they understood the concept. So we're talking compliance, regulations, financing, leasing versus buying, interest rates, bank accounts, easy pay. It was an unbelievable amount of content, but took about a month. All right, Rich,
And we do have another question. We've got
sure.
For the taxonomy chart, do you normally see different levels being taught to different employees? At what point do you focus on supervisors, vice versus entry-level employees?
All right. So, what we found, I wouldn't as much call it level as much as the job that they're on. For example, American Express, they were hiring people to be small business bankers, and they found that though they had a wonderful education and they knew all about finance, they hadn't exactly started their own business. So they created a simulation, and they actually had people for 10 days play a simulation to run a coffee shop so that they could relate to, they could empathize with the people that were coming to them looking for financial help. So for them, that worked. So they were being onboarded. They are a higher level, being that they had a finance background and they were in banking. If we're talking about strategy, we did some work with Chrysler for statistical process control, and people that were setting controls on machines, high tech, making adjustments, testing things, doctors. So it could be a sort of a frontline employee, but at a more technical. But from your question, yes, when we're talking about leadership training and management training, we really do like to be on the strategy side, and we'll give a situation of, we did some work with Exxon, and a department had tried to use a strategy to staff up and get their projects on time. And there was a 5-step process that they followed, but there's a lot of variables. So we would train people to look at the process that had been done in the past, find where mistakes had been made, and suggest alternative methods and see if it turned out better. So that ended up being more of a strategy. The exploration, we've done a lot of that with diagnosing automobiles, complex systems, a lot of work in high tech, did some work with Cisco on this. So it's kind of a blend. If the skill level or the job requirements are lower, then yes, the higher level of the pyramid would be for senior management and executives. But if you're in a highly technical field, then you end up going up to the top regardless of the position. All right, any others? I think I see one that probably about 5 to 10% require simulation of our customer base. I'd say 20 to 25% is exploration or better. a little less than half end up at strategy or higher, and then the rest end up down below. A lot of our clients come to us thinking that going just judgment is good enough, and we're doing our best to raise them up to consequence or strategy whenever possible. Okay, so for the Toyota example, we built a strategy application. So it was for collections, for all new collections employees, but also for existing employees, because they had to learn Salesforce, which became one software instead of 7. We wanted to enhance the practice with direct links to the performance support system. Salesforce has a knowledge base, and anytime we were teaching one of the learners how to work with the software, we would have them go to the knowledge base and read how to do it. Or during the training, we would bring up the knowledge base on the side so that they could see how to do it, which made it a much more realistic training. Prior, they taught all of the different software procedures as memorization, and then every 6 months when something changed, they had to unlearn everybody and train them on the new process. So now with Salesforce and the knowledge base, we would have them assume, well, I don't know what the process was yesterday, but I better go look up to see what it is today, because laws are constantly changing. And I'll give you an example of it. The challenge was to create interactive blended learning for new agents to increase quality while decreasing time to proficiency. So the 1 month of in class and 1 month of shadowing, they wanted to bring it down to 2 weeks of class and 1 week of shadowing, while introducing an entirely new technology without any reduction in customer satisfaction, because Toyota Financial Service actually has a very high level of satisfaction and a high level of people wanting to finance with Toyota again. So the strategy is we first got agreement on the performance problem and the KPIs. At a high level, their KPIs included compliance, not breaking any laws. It included getting the most money you can out of the person on the phone, but at the same time, coming across as a partner where you're not blaming them. You actually feel like you're a financial advisor helping them figure out the situation they're in. We wanted to increase their impression overall of Toyota, and at the same time, we wanted to test the accuracy and the speed at which you could complete these tasks, all at the same time. We used what's called an A model format to determine what those KPIs should be. We made sure that QA, who would listen to these calls and score them, was involved with the trainers and facilitators. Because what was happening is the people on the floor, the team leads, would teach how to do it one way. The quality people thought that was the wrong way to do it. People kept getting bad scores. It was like, I was just doing what I was told. So we got them together. We used an iterative approach to come up with a design that would be long-term. We made sure that we were focused on mastery, and we created a very high level of challenge and engagement. We got support from all levels of the company, and we used simulations that could actually be used on the floor, and we did very intense measurement, maintenance, and continuous improvement modeling during this. So at a high level, we went through defining the requirements and assessing the outcomes and making sure they aligned to get to what those KPIs were. Because for every choice we give the learner, we have measured each possible answer against all 5 of their KPIs. Because it isn't all everything's great, everything's bad. Some might maximize KPIs, but they have a negative influence on others. So it wasn't the right answer. It's the answer that gave the best overall value, with each KPI balancing off the others. Now, being that we're on interactions, and if anyone has been to any of our webinars or worked with us, we want to be sure that the learning started off with context. So it's always a story. And then we presented a challenge that simulates exactly what would happen on the job, so that they understand that their decisions have consequences. We made sure that we use the mouse and the keyboard and the speakers and the microphone to make it as realistic as possible. And the biggest part, we did 80 to 90% of the quote learning as feedback of choices instead of telling them what all the right answers are and within 2 minutes seeing if they remembered. We also used our Agile process called SAM. So the 1 minute version, we determined what the best activities would be, and we prototyped and designed and redesigned them with a limited amount of content, pilot tested them until we were sure the activities that we're going to show you worked. Then we put all the content into it through an alpha, beta, gold staging phase. So we made sure that the user interface and the experience was working before we put in all the content. So, poll question. Rich, which development approach are you currently using? An agile approach like SAM, ADDIE, or a little bit of both?
And again, I'll leave this poll up here for about a minute or until we get like 80% more.
It looks like most people are doing a little bit of both, which is great. Everyone seems to be adjusting ADDIE just a bit. I started my e-learning career on a Navy project, secret communication plane, and then an Air Force project. So I got to use ADDIE in its pure binder after binder after binder, tens of thousands of pages form.
Okay, that just about does it. And
Okay,
there's the
great.
results.
All right, yep, mostly both. All right, wonderful. So at this point, any additional questions before I jump in and do demos? Rich, anything you're seeing?
I don't, no new questions that we haven't already answered. Oh,
Okay, great.
hold on.
What we get?
Oh, never mind.
Maybe we get
This is just, and just for everybody, we will be posting this webinar once it renders and recorded on pretty much the same web page that you registered for this webinar, but we will be sending out an email, and I will put a link so that you can get a copy of the PowerPoint slide deck we're using. That is it.
All right. With Toyota, we needed to train people to, I love this, the chew gum and walk. Or it's chew gum and talk, which you shouldn't be chewing gum and talking. I know I probably have a habit of doing that sometimes. But the talking is talking with clients, using the right approach, focusing on needs, and partnering with them for Toyota. Then there's using the software. And when you watch these people in the collection centers and how fast they are at the software, they're robotic because they're carrying on these conversations. And I have no idea how they're entering fields and clipboard copying and pasting and drop downs. It's just scary. And you think that they're all on double speed. But to train people to be that way, we went through a progression of first, let's see if you know strategy. Because as I said, we're teaching strategy. So the first part is to let them know not everybody is the same. You know, not everyone, and we went through this whole thing as a persona. Some people are willing to pay, but can't. Some people are unwilling to pay, but they can, or they're unwilling to pay, but they can. Some people, it's a short-term issue they're trying to get through. Some people, it's a long-term issue that came out of nowhere. Some people are chronic. So you have to evaluate the person to determine what approach to use. So we started with kind of a simple talking with Christine. So we need to read carefully at the situation and decide how we're going to react to Christine based on the situation. Okay, so Christine says, I'm out of work. Okay, so what will you say? Do you want to say, that must be hard, is this a new situation? Do you have anything saved, or then you have no way to pay us? And these are actual responses. QA gave us the top 5 actual statements that people on the phones make. So let's say I say, well, that must be hard. And I submit that. And she says no. Okay, well, do you have any idea when you're going to get a new job? No, I don't. So do you have any plans to pay us? No, please don't call me again at home or at work. Now she hangs up. Based on regulations, if someone tells you not to call them like this, you can't ever call them again. Everything has to be done by mail. So if I want to review the feedback, then, hey, this was good. This is a great way to relate to the customer and open up the dialogue. Not a good transition. Avoid making the customer feel isolated. And this is abrupt and rude. This is a good way to lose the customer, which happened. And, you know, we could go back and try again. And, you know, we know that one worked. And so now it would be, tell me more so we can partner together. Submit. And then I've been out of work for 3 months. You've been out of work for 3 months, so what steps have you taken? Well, you know, this has been really hard. I have no idea. So then it's like, well, what will be helpful in figuring this out? You know, do you have like unemployment? Yes, I'm receiving unemployment. Okay, well, I can help you, you know, by maybe, maybe I have some ideas to, you know, make sure about a job or unemployment. We could submit that. No, I can't. Do you have any other sources of income? And, you know, sometimes these conversations could go on a little bit. My husband works. He's right here. He usually handles the bill. Okay, can I get to speak with your husband? And now we review the feedback, and I still made a couple mistakes, but what we didn't do was say, wrong, try again. We just had to do a little recovery. So the conversation took longer, but we allowed them to come back. So that was the first exercise they went through. And they went through 10 different customer types to show that you treat them all differently based on the situation. All right, so let me move to the next one. Now, the next thing we wanted to do is we wanted to put the learner in a situation to review real calls that have happened and rate them the way they're going to be rated by QA, because those are the KPIs. Before we throw them in the middle of it and just say, these are your KPIs, let's see how you do, we want them to first be an expert at realizing and scoring others so they can then be introspective about scoring themselves. Now, the job aids that they actually have up on their desk, we give them. This is what's up on their desk, that their process is greet, discover, propose, confirm, close, that they need to learn how to use persuasive language, what are communication skills, they have something called picture and lace. So in Salesforce, all of this is given to them. And this e-learning is given in a blended environment where they do some stuff in class or in virtual classrooms. Then these are given as activities. So the instructors would actually go through the first one with the students, and then the students would have 3 to 5 more to do on their own. But all of the stuff that they're being taught in the classroom, all the job aids, we have within the training. And then what we do is we give them the situation, because we kind of break it up. Some of these calls can take a half an hour. So for Michael Chapman, this is how it's due, past due. It told you what happened in the greet and discover, and now you're going to try to move on to the next phase where we're going to do the propose, confirm, and close. So I'm going to play that. Actually, what you're going to hear is the actual audio redacted from the call and the actual screen capture that was taken from the person that did this call.
All right, Mrs. Chapman, just to recap what we've discussed so far. You're currently unemployed. You have started to, will be receiving unemployment benefits next Thursday the 12th, and they will be bi-weekly for $500. Is that correct?
It is, yep.
All right. Now, we had mentioned that you were looking to make a payment next Thursday with that money. Have you done a payment with us over the phone before?
I think I have, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause it because this goes on for a while. Now, the idea is you're supposed to be scoring this call. So communication skills, did they use LACE? If you forgot what LACE is, then you go back up here and look it up. But you could say, well, they were good at picture. They never say wrong at Toyota. You have an opportunity to learn. They seem to be doing good on partnering, and they seem to be doing good on rapport. And then they had to do the same for negotiation, accountability, payment process, and documentation. This is what is being scored by the QA for every call when they say these calls are being recorded for training purposes. So we're telling them, you're in QA, you have to rate these. And when you get to the end, you submit your answers. And if you didn't get them all right, the ones that were right are green, they stick. And you got to go through the call again until you can match this up with how it should have been done. So that's the next step of getting them to understand the strategy is first we want you to rate someone else. And then the last step is going to be, we want you to now do it yourself. So now we're jumping in. The call focuses on the propose, confirm, close stages. You'll be tested on best practices. If you need additional help, click the hint button. All right, so we're here. Now on the bottom, we're starting them out at full scores for knowledge, analysis, consultative, delinquency, and standard operating procedures. Those are the 5 KPIs. The choices on the side, each one is given a score from -5 to 5, including a 0 on its impact on every one of these. So one of them might be a +2 on knowledge and SOPs, but say neutral on anything else. So if I pick one, so choose the best way to lead into suggested payment. Let's set up a payment so your account doesn't go 30 days late. We'd better set up a payment so your credit isn't damaged. I see you have a payment that is overdue. Can you take care of that today? And it's subtle. It'd be like, well, 1 and 3 both seem good, and maybe it's a good idea to tell them you don't want to go 30 days late. So let's pick that one.
Yeah, okay, I guess I could do that.
And that's them replying. So now where would you find the Western Union button? And if I don't know where, I click hint, and then it says, oh, down here. Okay, so I click that, but I lost a knowledge point because I didn't know where that was in the software. And so now enter the customer's account number. So I would go here, and I believe it's 00666321111. Enter. Okay, click OK. And now I'm back to talking. All right, well, choose the next step. Great. Can you pay the $407.99 by March 4th? Great. Now we need you to pay the $815.98. So at a very high level, if you're late, that means you missed, let's say it's April. It is still. You missed the March payment, and your April one's coming up due. So we really want you to pay both March and April. And if you have any late fees or fines, we really want you to pay those too. So the goal was to get them to pay all of it. And they'd say, but my due date isn't until 3 days from now. Well, yes, but if we can get you to pay it all now, that was the push. Now here was the interesting thing. After this training was completely built, there was some regulation or law that said you cannot push a customer to pay anything except what they're past due on, because I think there were complaints and people felt pressured that they actually didn't make their house payment or didn't have money for prescription medication because they were told they had to pay the total amount as opposed to just the past due amount, without risking their car being repossessed. So after we built all of this training, we had to go back and rebuild it because of a law change. So those are the kind of things that we run into. That's why we use the knowledge base. So we minimized any of the training around compliance and the laws and regulations. The only thing we had to do is go in and change some of these choices as to what is the right choice. And the screen grabs got rid of the yellow right there on total amount due. So this goes on for a while. And then when you get to the end, you're scored. And if you don't get an appropriate amount of all of these points cumulatively, and you can't be below a certain level for any of them, if you get to that point, you're completed, you move on. If not, you have to do it again. You have to keep doing this over and over again until you get an appropriate quality score on all your KPIs to move forward. So sort of in a nutshell, those are the 3 different activities we used to teach the students the strategy around understanding the clients, their needs, how to treat them, how to use the job aids, to understand like communication skills. So we could tell them this, but we wanted to create a simulated environment where they're either choosing to use these or not would affect their KPI scores. So if I go back over to the PowerPoint. So in summary, we had instructor-led activities. So they were in the classroom, but they did the e-learning from within the classroom. And we made sure that their performance support tools were used. And we gave them both online and printed. And the results is they actually were able to improve their KPIs and reduce the training time based on their goals that they had set out. So I think the next slide we have, the last part of this one is they put together a continuous improvement model, because coming out of their quality control center, they would go back and they would say, okay, we had some issues. Do we think that the training requirements were wrong? Are the policies and regulations not updated? Did the subject matter experts maybe tell them this was something that happened? When you're first calling someone, you're supposed to say, for me, is Steve there? Because if I know I'm late on a payment and someone uses my full name, I'm hanging up. So they would say, is Steve there? And I would say, this is Steve. And they would say, Steve Lee? This is, Susan from Toyota Financial Services. They just broke the law. You're supposed to confirm I'm Steve Lee. And they thought if I say Steve Lee and wait 2 seconds and I don't disagree with you, that was confirmation. And they built the whole training that way. Then we found out, no, you actually have to say Steve Lee and wait for a yes before you can move on. So that ended up getting rolled through. We figured out it was a problem with the SME guidance. So we had to change, and then it went through an impact report, workflow. We then decided if it was a development issue, design issue. So they're going through this constantly using customer complaints, manager reports, and QA scoring to constantly improve their overall training, design, and content. So at this point, additional questions. So Rich, did you see anything in there as I was going along?
We have not gotten any other questions on the specifics that are out there.
Okay. Well, we've got about 10 minutes. So I want to leave it open. How long did this take to develop? It was 3 months total. Hi, Scott. Oh, Scott Nipper. How you doing? It took a month to go through the analysis, and it took 2 months to put it together. But just so you know, there were 11 different customers that all had a different persona. So we used the willing to pay, able to pay, short-term, long-term, chronic to create 11 different customers. So for 11 different customers, we went through the whole QA process, all 5 steps. And then we did, that was early stage. Then we did late stage for people who they're at the point of being repossessed. And I didn't know this, but people get their cars repossessed and then they find a way to catch up and then they get their car back. So it took 2 months to put all that together.
Steve, there is a question about tools being used to develop. Maybe you want to give a little bit of what we're doing most recently with Articulate, Captivate, HTML5.
Sure. We are what we call tool agnostic. So we will use the tool if our customer requires it. We have our favorites. And so if a client says, how would you like to build things? Up until the recent past, we developed in Zebra whenever we're given that choice. Right now, we've been doing a lot of native HTML5 because of security requirements, needing to work in mobile, on a phone. the 508 compliant and being able to use web technology. So we've created editors so that you don't need to be an HTML5 programmer to change content, logic, and media. So we do a lot of stuff in Storyline and Captivate, but what you just saw there is, I wouldn't say it's beyond what you could do in Captivate or Storyline, but the amount of additional programming, state programming, the need to pass variables and change things makes it extremely slow to develop, and it's hard to create templates. With this project, we're able to create templates, and we created what we call the content grid, and we could just put in the audio, the screen, what the next screen was, and that's why it took about a month for the analysis, about a month to design the templates with all external content, and then about a month to construct it. Because the construction didn't require developers. The developers built the templates. Our instructional designers were actually writing in the tool, so they were doing the writing and the construction at the same time. I think for this one was built originally in Zebra, and then we created the HTML5 version of it. So they have both. Zebra was a tool that we preferred working in. It was built based on Flash, and I don't want to go into the history of Adobe and Flash. And so Toyota's IT department said they can't have anything that has anything to do with Flash. So we migrated to a pure HTML5 platform for them, and that's what we're using now. We actually use HTML5, but we create templates out of, they call them frameworks. There's a framework called Angular and Bootstrap. There's Polymer and React. There's a couple more. There's a lot of free shared code out there, and we've been able to collect and build templates. And then we're using tables and spreadsheets to be able to put content into, and then we're able to compile it. So I have a talk I give that basically says using GoDaddy technology to build eLearning. So form-based editing if you've got those templates built.
And Steve, Debbie is asking on the Toyota piece, since the CSRs only hear the customer's voice, why were images of the customers used through that process?
Well, we used the images in the what we call the empathy stage, because we were trying to show them that you might look at this person and you may gather some assumptions, some bias just based on their look. So the first lady was, an elderly lady, and we want to show you that you can't judge a book by its cover. The truth is they never see these people; they're on the phone with them. So we used, for the first couple, we used images just to show them, don't make any judgments. What we found are people that went to work in collections turned their nose up at people that had financial problems, and they didn't understand why. We actually had an activity they went through where we said, okay, you have a job, this is how much you make, what kind of a Toyota car would you buy, are you going to buy or rent a house, how much you're putting in savings, you're all good, you're stable? Yeah. Okay, guess what? You just lost your job. Now, do you want to what? Apply for some new jobs? You want to go on employment? And then over time, they never found a job. They said, do you want to go to work at McDonald's part-time? Do you want to, gain unemployment? Okay, your collections person's calling. Do you want to talk to them? Do you want to pull stuff out of retirement? And after 90 days simulated, they all figured out that's why nobody answers the phone when we call. Oh my gosh, I would do the same thing they did. So when we showed the images, it was all part of the empathy part of this. And the strategy part that you need to take a strategy based on what you hear and ask the questions to develop a strategy. Don't have any preconceived notions. But then after that, it's just the software and the voice. And so we definitely wanted to have them hearing the customers as they were speaking. So hopefully that answered your question.
And Steve, I don't know if you can see this question from, and I lost it now, from Heather. She's asking about authenticity and what is authentic enough. And this, in my mind, goes beyond just like software training and task training, but process training is how we at Allen Interactions have done real authentic things. And I think you mentioned earlier the bakery or the coffee
Well, yeah,
shop
the
type
coffee
of
shop.
situation.
Right. So the short answer on that is we want to find out what kind of mistakes are being made, and we want to make those mistakes available. So with the Toyota, we found out the kind of mistakes they made. They would try to get too much too quickly. They would try to give financial advice. We took what we felt were the answers that when we did survey and we went on site and we talked to hundreds of collections agents, the ones they said, yeah, that seems like the right answer that wasn't, we made sure that that answer was there. Why do we think Toyota was authentic? Because if they could take a QA call and they could score it appropriately, like a QA person, and then they would do the exact same thing. We have timing in there. If they don't answer a person's questions quick enough, they say, are you still there? They get frustrated, they hang up. So we feel when we can program in the top 80% of mistakes, and we watch learners pick them, knowing in their own mind that that's the right thing to do, we think we've got it. A great example, we trained used car salesmen. And it's a role play, just like you saw, except the biggest mistakes they made, they'd ask for the sale too quickly. They would go say, let me go talk to my sales manager, either too quickly or not soon enough. So not only did we give them, this is what the customer said, these are 3 choices, there was a button on the screen that said, try to close the sale now. There was a button on the screen that said, go talk to the sales manager. And to top it all off, if they could not get it closed within 10 minutes, another customer is waiting for them. And then another customer. So they are given a scoring system where they have to close as many, and they actually would think that by trying to close the sale quickly, they can then serve more customers instead of watching them go to another salesperson. So by giving them motivation to make mistakes is how we think we get the authenticity. And then we had heard that about the content. Yes, we, for Toyota and many other customers, provided them the framework and the editors so they could do it themselves. And so when we work with clients, if a client has an internal staff and they can use what we build as learning objects and put content in themselves, we happily share and train them on how to do that. Most of our customers would prefer that we do the writing. They don't either have the bandwidth or they feel that they're great writers, but not sure that they're good at writing scenarios. So we're happy to do either, but we're happy to train our customers and just provide tools for them to do it themselves. All right, well, I think we're right at the end. So I think I got another minute for questions. Anyone have any additionals? And Rich, I know you probably want us to put like that screen up, right?
Yep, that screen, that's great. Any other questions? And again, I'm Rich Peterson. I handle as webmaster of and webinar master. You'll see my picture, or at least a token at the bottom of the Allen Interactions website for chat. And usually if I'm free, I am available for any questions then, or send us emails or give us a phone call on that. When you
Rich,
end this.
yeah, Rich, let me just jump in real quick. I saw that Dr. Allen, we're so lucky to have him here. In the chat, someone was asking about the activities and design backwards. So really quickly, we built that last activity first. And then we put users in front of it to find out were they able to just go there as a starting point. And then we found out no. So then we created the second activity, which was, well, let's see if you can figure out what other people are doing wrong. And then we found there was still a gap on the empathy side. So we created the first activity last. It's what we call designing backwards. So when we go in, we try to first design the authentic simulation, and then we start designing enabling activities. All right, Rich, sorry. I just saw that, want to jump in.
Not a problem. The only last thing that I was going to say, when you end out of this webinar, you'll be taken to a quick survey. If you'd answer those questions on the survey, that will help us in going forward with other webinars. And if you have any additional questions, again, we're always available if you want to talk to Steve directly, or if you want one of our people to come and talk to your teams, we can do that either through a web meeting or on-site visit as well. So we appreciate you all coming and hanging out with us for this past hour.
All right, thanks all, and have a great rest.